So on the topic of UFC also a little bit, there's word that UFC is going to be bringing in uniforms soon to fighters. What do you think about that decision? I can already tell you're not too happy about that. What do you think about that idea?
Uniforms of fighters, that is just nuts. I can't believe they got to do that. Talking about taking away complete freedom from the fighters, that's just crazy. I don't know. Are they going to pay them extra for wearing uniforms? I don't know. I don't see the reason behind it besides just controlling the fighters. But I'm over the fact of talking smack against UFC anymore. They gave a lot to me to be where I am today. For my family and so forth. I'm very thankful for Lorenzo and Frank Fertitta. Me and Dana have our words back and forth. Life's too short to hate, and right now I'm just keeping my life in a positive environment for my kids, for myself, because it just makes it much more easier to live the day-to-day life. And I'm happy here at Bellator, and I have no complaints, and I wish all the success in the world to UFC and the fighters there who have to wear uniforms. It sucks to do, but I guess they got to do it if they want to fight in the second biggest organization in the world. I'm hyping up Bellator a little much. Yeah, UFC is the best right now. We got to walk where they're walking. And that's just an opportunity of making a business to that point. They're doing a great job over at UFC of done what they do, but I think Bellator could fill those same shoes even better now that Scott Croker's here.
Right now, do you also have any thoughts on TRT exemptions? There's a lot of older fighters these days who've been using it, and there's so much talk about TRT and that kind of stuff. Do you have any opinion on the use of TRT in the sport and the legal use of TRT? Should that be allowed?
If guys use TRT, they need to retire. Get out of the sport. I'm 39 years old. I've never touched any of that stuff. Why would guys get an opportunity to not play in a even field? If you're going to compete, fight for what you can fight for, not make supplements to make you a better fighter, to fight stronger, fight harder. I mean, what type of example we're trying to set for our kids who are fans who are watching the sport, that it's okay to take shortcuts to be a fighter? We should never do that. And I think if they don't let it happen, it's great. Random drug testing, I think they should do as much as possible. It's just one of those things. Don't look for shortcuts. If you can't be a fighter anymore, retire. And a lot of fighters have done that, and our continue will do that. I mean, you look at Forrest, he did it. He couldn't handle it anymore. So it just takes the whole idea of fighting on a even level away completely. Like I say, me being 39 years old, fighting against Shlemenko, who was 30, I felt as good as I did when I was 30. It's just a mindset, I think. And never looking for a shortcut.
I want to ask you also about some TNA wrestling stuff, because we saw you last year back in Rampage, was promoting the fight as well. You guys were in TNA, part of the, I think you guys were both part of the main event Mafia or something, and then Rampage turned on you, all that kind of drama. Basically, my question is, and despite the fact that TNA might not be renewed again, are you still with TNA in any aspect? Is there any chance we might see you, or we're going to see you back in the ring at any point?
I will be in the ring with TNA soon, really soon actually. Me and Dixie Carter, we sat down and talked about some things for the future. I love it. I love professional wrestling. I've always, since I can remember back in Hulk Hogan and Macho Man Randy Savage, and back in those days, I was a huge fan. So being a part of that now, it's fun. Yeah, yes, it's storyline, but it's male soap operas. It's fun. I dig it, and I think Dixie Carter over at TNA is doing an amazing job over there. And we'll see what holds for the future for me. But yes, I will be. I will be doing TNA again for sure.
And we should mention, this is actually your second run in TNA, because you were there with the company back in the very early days of TNA.
Yes.
And aside from that, now there's word that Spike not be renewing TNA. So do you have any thoughts on what the future of TNA could be if this deal doesn't get renewed? Can they continue to survive without a TV deal like this?
I don't know. I guess it really comes down to Dixie of doing the right promotions to make it happen. I think she can. She's a very smart businesswoman. I think Spike needs professional wrestling in them. If they're going to get it, TNA can be the one. WWE kind of owns that whole world. But once again, it's like UFC and Bellator. Bellator needs to get in the same type of promotion style that UFC does, and I think the same thing goes to TNA. They could do the same thing as WWE. They'll be fine. Spike needs, same type of competition, same type of shows, and I think with TNA they can make it happen.
Right now, as fans of the fight nerd we covered Old School MMA. That's one of our big shows on the website, is Old School MMA, and we're actually getting up to the point where you're going to be making your debut in the cage. We're just about out to UFC 13, but we've seen you now walking out with Tank Abbott before, so I got to ask you, do you have any stories about Tank Abbott that you can tell us?
Wow. Yeah, a lot of them. Well, I guess when we first met, was over our friend Paul Herrera's house, who was my coach and his coach also too, and we're all drinking, kicking back, and his way to beat up guys is he'll kind of hype them up, and he said, "Oh, yeah, you look like a big kid, you look really tough," and what he was trying to do, he was trying to bait me into me trying to fight him, and it wasn't happening. And he did that a lot, and I looked and laughed, and I'm like, "I know what you're trying to do." He goes, "What am I trying to do?" I go, Dave, I ain't falling for that BS. And it's a few other stories, but, no here, no there. But he was a cool cat in general. He helped me out when I first got in the UFC, and I got to thank him for that.
And we've been talking a lot about Tank was always kind of an unpredictable force of nature almost, and how, the UFC wanted him to be maybe a possible face of the company, but then it couldn't really control what he would say. Do you have any thoughts about that as well?
If you want to be real, you can't really control what people are going to say. As with me, I'm going to say what I'm going to say. It comes from the heart, and I learned that from him. And, you always want to make sure that people ask what is he going to say next. But Tank was a guy in his time for the 5 years he was there, and I just separate myself completely away from him because I wanted to be the world champion. I want to come in and just be an entertainer, but I wanted to be a world champion, and I worked hard to make that happen. It took me a little time, 1.5 years to make that happen, and I did it, and I just never stopped. It wasn't about just making money. It was about being a world champion. But as I got old, I realized that this is a business. I got to take care of my children and pay the bills, and I was able to do that.
Now let's talk one more question about old school days. Now let's talk about your UFC debut, which again we're coming up soon with the old school MMA review. We're going to be watching Tito make his debut in the cage. So just tell us about what it was like leading up, basically the events leading up to you finally getting signed with the UFC, and then that first fight with Guy Mesger.
Well, actually, it was the first fight was against Wes Albritton of that night. We fought twice that night. Yep, and I came in as an amateur. I think I was the only person to ever fight in the UFC for free. I fought free.
I've heard about that. So, what was the story about that?
Well, I had a scholarship for wrestling, and if I used any type of or went to any kind of competition that used wrestling and got paid for it, I was a pro athlete at the time. So I fought for free. I fought for no money, and people said I was crazy, but I loved to compete at the time. And I was a wrestler. I was a kid, and I wanted to try and see what it was like. When I fought in UFC 13 in Augusta, Georgia, it was just excitement. I just thought in my mind that let's get this over with. Let's do this. And I remember right before the event started, I was making weight, and I was just cutting weight, taking my plastics off, and I look over, and I see this guy running on the treadmill, and I was like, holy shit, that's Randy Couture. I mean, being an amateur wrestler myself, I knew who he was, and we fought his first fight in UFC that night. Yep, and we both started at the same time, and it's kind of crazy because it's almost 17 years ago. 17 years and 2.5 months. It's crazy just to see that I'm still competing. And I can remember back then of just looking, going, "Wow, that's Randy Couture," because I watched him in Greco-Roman, wrestling for the Olympics and stuff, and it was just cool to see.
Now, one last thing. So we talked about your early days in the career. Now let's talk about the future for Tito. Any fights planned coming up soon? And is there one fight you want to have before you finish up for good in MMA?
I think the next step possibly would be in October. They're looking possibly on a free on Spike. Not sure if a pay-per-view is going to happen, so we're just going to kind of wait and see. I want to be a world champion before I'm done. That's my goal, and that's what I'm going to do. I will be world champion in Bellator before I'm done, 100% for sure.
How do you think you square up against the current champion?
Emanuel Newton is super tough. He has great stand-up, great takedown defense. I think it would be a grind-out fight, 4th, 5th round, and, I see my hand being raised at the end.
All right, well, we look forward to seeing you back again soon in the Bellator cage. Tito Ortiz, thank you so much for your time today.
I appreciate it, man. Thank you much.